Well, lesson 67, and we were talking about Iceland. I hope that all that we studied there and the wonderful things that are there and the beauty of Iceland, that maybe you would like to go there someday. I would. I certainly would. But yes, we're supposed to be studying history. So what about Iceland? What kind of people lived in Iceland in the past? And when was the first person that lived on Iceland? Because Iceland is pretty remote. They'd have to take boats to get to that island, wouldn't they? So let's talk about this. Well, history records this guy, Pytheas. Pytheas, he was an explorer way back in 300 BC. That's a long time ago. 300 BC, he started exploring the coast of Europe, up there where England and Great Britain was. And he came onto this big island, and he called this island Thule. Thule, Thule. It was about a 6 days sea travel from North Great Britain. And he actually thought this would be a land for his country, which we look, if it's 300 BC, looks like Greece, huh? But he didn't stay there, or he didn't claim the land of Iceland. He just recorded it. Then way later on, in 800 AD, so we're talking about over 1,000 years later, some people went to Iceland, and they lived in Iceland. Well, who were these people? Well, they were monks. They actually were Christian monks from Ireland. We did study about Ireland, didn't we? About Patrick of Ireland. Well, these were some of his monks, and they sailed over there, and they decided that they would make a settlement and live there in their monastery there on Iceland from Ireland. So the people that really settled down there, you think, were Irish. Kind of unusual. But the Irish monks didn't stay there, because another group came to settle there. And they were from Scandinavia. Well, where's Scandinavia? Well, if you look on a map, it'd be like Sweden and Denmark and Norway, that area. But back there, between 800 and 1000 AD, they came in as pirates. You see, when we study about Scandinavia at that time, they were mainly pirates. Oh, at least those that went out on the sea. And they had specific boats that looked like pirate ships that went, and they sailed and they conquered many lands. They were pagans. They had not been given the gospel at all. They were not Christians at all. You may call them Norsemen or Nordic or Normans. The French called them Normans as they invaded France. They were constantly invading different lands. But they were pretty hardy people, and they thought, we're going to go and invade Iceland. And they drove out the monks. You see, when the pirates came in, when the Vikings came in, they would kill the monks. They would kill people just to settle, so the monks had to leave. So the Irish monks, left Iceland. In 900 AD, that's before 1000 AD, 900 AD, hundreds of settlers and families came. Not just the pirates in themselves, but the pirate families came. And homes were built there with stone, wood, and they usually built their homes right into the earth. That's why we know that they were Scandinavian homes. And they brought horses there to work there. And, you can imagine they brought some things from Europe too, because Iceland didn't have, like we said, didn't have a lot of animals and didn't have a lot of plants, and it couldn't really grow plants, although the Vikings were very good at fishing too, because they were actually boat people. They loved to be on the seas. So, like I said, they drove the monks out, and then they just put together their own little towns and groups, and they had the first governing assembly. They would assemble the people together for their Scandinavian government there, and they called this government, let's see, I think I have, oh, there I do. Can you imagine? Can you say this? Althing. That was the name of their government. Althing. Althing was the oldest legislator type government in the world. They called it an Althing, and they got together to govern their people. Okay, there's more to this story. As you can imagine, it actually gets pretty exciting, so stay tuned. Their Vikings were explorers, so they didn't always stay right there in Iceland. In 985, there was a guy named Eric the Red. Eric the Red, he was a pirate for sure. He was a Viking, and he sailed west from Iceland to Greenland. Now Greenland's looks like a huge island, way bigger than Iceland, but it was pretty uninhabitable. Not that many people lived in Greenland. At that time, none. But here comes Eric the Red. So he sails there and brings some settlers to settle in Greenland. His son, Leif Erickson. Have you ever heard that name, Leif Erickson? Let me tell you, I've heard that name for a long time because when I grew up, the park next to where we lived was called Leif Erickson Park. And the pool was called Leif Erickson Pool. And there was two big rock monuments there that basically talked about Leif Erickson being that great person that came and discovered America in 1000 AD, way before Christopher Columbus. Now, I'm not saying, as he came, there were people there. There were peoples there. We would call the natives there. But when you say discover, that Europe discovers America, he discovered America and recorded it. So his son, Leif Erickson, he traveled. There he was in Greenland, where they settled, and he traveled back to Norway. But something happened because, you see, Leif Erickson was known as a Viking pirate, and he raided many, many lands. And Eric the Red, even more harsh. People were afraid of those names. But when he came back to Norway, the king there, King Olaf, sounds like a Swedish name, huh? But anyway, King Olaf of Scandinavia, he had become Christian. He had heard the gospel. And so he shared the gospel with Leif. And Leif he was just so excited. How amazing the gospel. And Leif was born again. How amazing. You won't find this in a lot of your history books. So Leif became a missionary. A Viking missionary. Can you believe that? How exciting. So Leif lost his way. He's going back to Greenland, and he's going to tell everybody in Greenland all about God, because that's what he was called to do now. He felt that the Lord now has shown him, I need to go and tell my people in Iceland and Greenland. So he did. But as he headed out off to Greenland, that's when he got lost. And he landed on this shore. He went quite a ways and he landed on the shore and he thought, where in the world is it? It doesn't look like Greenland at all. There was wild wheat and vineyards and maple trees. This was very unusual to Leif. So he named it Vinland. And he named it for Scandinavia, for King Olaf, Vinland. But he didn't stay long that we know of, although they think that now that later on, some of the Vikings came to that area of Newfoundland, Canada, and settled there. The reason we think so is because back in 1960, and this is in your book, Helge and Anne Ingstend, were their name, They came and they found ruins. They were archaeologists, and they found ruins and artifacts of Viking origin in Newfoundland, Canada. They had evidence of 8 houses and 4 workshops, a forge, and the walls were with peat moss bags, and built into the earth, similar to the houses, how they built houses back in that time in Norway and Sweden in 1000 AD. They were so excited finding that. Now, some people are a little skeptical of that, but we do have those ruins there. So most likely, Leif brought back settlers to settle in the Americas way before Christopher Columbus. Leif Erickson was named Leif the Lucky, but I would say he was not Leif the Lucky. He knew the Lord, and he was driven by telling people about Jesus, driven by the gospel. He returned to Greenland, and in Greenland, he taught people about Jesus. And then Olaf sent another missionary to join him, and in Iceland, and they preached the gospel in Iceland. In the year 1000, Althing, remember the government there? Do you know what they decided to do? Althing. They said everybody, all people on Iceland should become Christians. They said, you all need to become Christians. We found the true and living God. Can you imagine that? So Iceland became a Christian nation. So the Vikings, their conversion to Christianity is more than fascinating, isn't it? How far did the gospel reach in such a short period of time to the outermost areas of the earth? Well, when I think about Leif Erickson, I think about when I grew up, and I told you about that little park there. But the guy that built that park, he wrote some things, and he was from Norway. He had been an immigrant from Norway, and he said Leif Erickson was his favorite person, his hero. He was a pioneer in navigation. He navigated to the farthest points that he knew of the earth. He was a crusader for the Lord, crusader for the church and for the Lord. And he was a leader of men. He's a little saying, he said, cattlemen, kinsmen die when self also dies, but a noble man never dies if renown when one gets. Yes. Leif Erickson's name there in the midst of Iowa, written in this little park. But you know one thing, back then, I didn't know. I sat on those rocks and played in that pool, and I knew Leif Erickson, but I really didn't know that he was a born-again Christian, that he loved Jesus. So how amazing now is it to find out that he went to America, probably brought the gospel to America too, way before Christopher did. How exciting. Although, we have to say, there were some natives there in America, and possibly on Greenland too, that had come into Greenland or in Iceland. But the European world, that clear over on the other side of the world, didn't know about it until now.